This is the second video for helping you prepare for the 5th grade Alabama Science Assessment, and this one is covering Content Standard number 2. And in this standard, you're going to need to know about mass, volume, and density. And primarily it's going to be definition. So you just need to be able to define these terms. That mass is the amount of matter that is in an object. The volume is the amount of space that an object takes up, and that density is the amount of mass per unit volume. Talking about the mass, in our class what we did is we figured out what the mass of different objects were by putting them on a gram scale, and you measure mass in terms of grams. And so in this example, the students are experimenting with different types of objects. I believe that's an eraser in the top picture, a pencil in the bottom picture, and they're weighing it against gram weights that we had and balancing them out to find out the mass of an object. So once you have found its mass, then you know how much matter is in that object based on its grams, number of grams. We used liquid to find the volume of irregular shaped objects. We could stick them in the water if they were small enough to fit in the tube, and the amount of water that was displaced, in other words, the water was moved out of the way to make room for the object, the amount of water that was moved would tell us what the volume of the object was. So if it started at 10 milliliters and it went up to 15 milliliters, then we knew after you put the object in, then we knew the object was 5 milliliters in terms of its volume.
Volume can also be measured in cubic centimeters.
We then took the objects and we found the mass and the volume of each object, and we put them on a graph so that we could get a better idea of what was taking place. So if you look at this, you see that the objects in blue were grapes, the red dots indicate marbles, the green indicate rocks, the yellows were foam darts, and then the white were glue sticks. And what we found was that the objects that had more mass to them, in other words, their mass in grams was greater, if they had more mass but less volume, they tended to sink. But if they had less mass but more volume, they tended to float. And it fits in with the equation that we found that in order to find the density of an object, you take its mass and you divide it by its volume. And when you do that, you're able to get a number that represents its density. And if the mass is high, but the volume is small, you're going to end up with an object that has a high density. But if the mass is small, but the volume is high, for example, these Nerf darts, you're going to end up with an object that has a very small density. In other words, if you put it in water, it's going to float. So these were two things that we discovered through our experimenting this year with mass and volume of objects in terms of how it relates to density. So you're going to need to know these definitions, and you'll need to be able to say something about the mass and the volume in comparison to an object's density.